Hi, everyone. My name is Madigan Johnson. I'm the head of communications at Friendly Space, and I want to warmly welcome you to From Primary Data Collection to Analysis, a unified human-in-the-loop ecosystem for humanitarian data. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joshua Beretta from Kobo. I'm the humanitarian project coordinator on our team.
And thanks, Marigan, for the intro. And my name is Jose Cobos. I work as head of innovation at Friendly Space.
All right, so today what we're going to do is have a 90-minute collaborative session. What we'll do is we'll give you a bit of introduction on context about the critical challenge of AI in the humanitarian sector and the human oversight. We will then go into two tools, so KoboToolbox, where we'll look at the intelligence design process that they're doing for their survey form builder. And then we'll also turn to Data Friendly Space's Gannett Situation Hub, where we'll explain the human in the loop for crisis analysis. After that, we will discuss among the presenters a couple questions on where do we kind of go from here. And then at the end, we'll open up for an interactive discussion with you because we also want to hear from you. So to introduce, basically setting the humanitarian AI scene, what has happened recently with humanitarian AI has been nothing short of kind of remarkable in the past 2 years. Data Friendly Space recently conducted a survey with the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, where we polled around, I think it's like 1,729 respondents in the in January. Before that, we had done a previous survey last May and June. So now we have around 4,000 different voices of humanitarian practitioners. And what we found is that 95% of humanitarians have used AI at some point in their work. However, 9% of those respondents reported widespread integration in their organizations, meaning that 91% of organizations have not fully implemented AI into their work processes. The other part that kind of comes up, and it's a little bit alarming, is that 69% of respondents reported using commercial AI tools. So when you don't have any sort of training, you don't have any sort of organization integration, and people are using commercial AI tools without knowing the risk or the ethics of inputting sensitive humanitarian information into those systems, there becomes this huge problem for the humanitarian sector. What we are seeing is that adoption is practitioner driven. It's not a top-down approach, and we need to challenge ourselves to move from individual practice to a sector-wide transformation. So, what are the critical challenges? This is why human in the loop matters across the entire data ecosystem and in general the humanitarian sector. What we're seeing is that AI can process vast volumes of crisis data in minutes, but what it lacks is contextual judgment. Where it gets interesting, and which is why we're going to be here today, is the human expertise. Humanitarians bring the local knowledge, the cultural sensitivity, the ethical judgment that is really needed to complement that machine speed and that AI processing. So what we're going to try to focus on is this balanced approach. The goal of this is to augment, not replace humans, and have technology that respects and represents the people it serves. So, the session objectives. What we're going to show is how AI and human oversight can work together across the humanitarian data lifecycle. We'll showcase some tools from KoboToolbox and Data Friendly Space that embed human judgment at critical decision points in this process. We'll also explore the ethical and practical implications of AI in crisis response. And then we want to have an open dialogue about the future of the humanitarian data ecosystem, localization, and data sovereignty. So I would like to now pass it over to Joshua from KoboToolbox. Go.
All right. Thanks, Marigan. So I'm going to be focusing on intelligent design for primary data collection, so different aspect of the data lifecycle to where Data Friendly Space is focusing on a little bit later, and how Kobo is approaching this new world of AI coming into every aspect of our lives. So how are we taking a tool that's already an established common good, I guess, digital public good within the humanitarian space, and how do we grapple with integrating AI into already successful tool without increasing risks to the populations in need who we are serving. Was it working for you?
It was. Maybe it has to come back over this. I don't know. Do you want me to-
Yeah, you can. Technical problems. All right. So, as we all know, our humanitarian organizations, the humanitarian sector is facing growing pressure to do more with less. Decision making, resource allocation, resource planning, it all depends on the quality of information we're able to collect in the field. Over the last few days, I've also heard people talk about that we need to do more with the same rather than more with less, because maybe that just sounds nicer, less intense, but I don't think that's really the case or the reality for most of us. Most of us are losing resources, we're losing personnel, and the need seems to be growing. So how can we actually fill some of that gap? And we see that with the introduction of AI and some of these advanced technologies, organizations and the survey that you, DFS and HLA were doing, were showing this increasing dependence and the turning to AI tools to fill some of that resource gap. So the information often starts with a form, especially as we look at primary data collection. And form design is harder than it looks, even though it might just be a drag and drop interface. If you're familiar with KoboToolbox, actually creating a high quality form that results in high quality data in the end is actually quite a challenging process. Most organizations don't have dedicated survey methodologists, and they don't have time for multiple design iterations before they go out into the field. They also don't have, typically, sometimes at least, access to specialized training to support that process. Switch slides. So if we think to a practical example of what it takes to gather testimony data in a truth and reconciliation context, you need to ask about traumatic experiences in a language that might not be the practitioner's first language, in a way that doesn't re-traumatize the individuals that you're encountering out in the field. You don't want to be putting them at additional risk as well with the type of data that you are collecting, or the way that you are asking those questions, or the individuals that you are actually encountering through your data collection process. But you also need to make sure that the data that you collect is structured in a way that can actually be used after that data collection, that it can be used for mapping, it can be used for analysis, used for creating reports that result in meaningful change. The form design decisions you make before a single interview starts, how the consent is framed, how questions are sequenced, how the questions are worded, determine whether the data protects or puts people at additional risk. And this is not just theoretical. I've actually seen this exact example play out in practice and seen both the data that's come out of it and the inappropriate amount of information that was collected. But also on the other side, the consent and the process that went into collecting that data resulted in them not necessarily being able to even use that data for the purposes that they intended, in the sense of being able to use that in a court to actually get some kind of accountability for the situation that happened. So when the first step is weak, sorry, we can stay on this slide. Everything downstream is undermined. The poor form design leads to poor data collection. Poor data leads to poor analysis, and poor analysis leads to misallocated aid, missed protection risks, and decisions made on false or incomplete pictures of reality. So the consequences are real. Evidence is rejected in judicial proceedings due to design flaws, assessments that don't ask the right questions, and data that's collected in ways that put those communities at additional risk. So our starting point for responsible AI in humanitarian data is this. We want to get that first step right. That means responsible, human-centered AI at the very beginning of the data lifecycle. Not as a shortcut, but as an amplifier to the expertise that the practitioners already have. So we're not trying to replace the humans. We're trying to help them create better quality data, better quality surveys that ultimately serve the communities that they are intended to. All right, next slide. So KoboToolbox was founded to solve a specific problem, to enable reliable data collection in fragile and low connectivity contexts where other tools failed. So that was paper to digital. And that transformation, as you've seen over the last 15 or so years that Kobo has been around, has dramatically changed the landscape of data collection in the aid context, but in many others as well. Today, we have over 32,000 organizations that use KoboToolbox in over 220 countries and territories, so that's almost everywhere. And over 1 billion, I think James, my colleague, was saying 1.3 billion surveys collected cumulatively since 2010, with 13 million surveys per month. So scaling data collection in contexts where it previously wasn't possible. 98% of organizations that use KoboToolbox use it for free as well. So we have structured our organization, structured the tool such that it remains an open source and public digital good in the space, trying to expand access to high quality data collection. Kobo as well, you'll see our fancy new branding that was established in 2019 that might often confuse people if you search for Kobo and you see an e-reader. That's not us. All of those applying for jobs at Kobo, make sure you can tell the difference between the e-reader or the organization. So we have been established as a non-profit organization to ensure the sustainability of the tool, of KoboToolbox, the platform, that it continues to be used as a public good and continues to remain freely accessible to as many people as possible. We've also built in support staff and resources within our organization to support other organizations who are using the tool in the field. My colleague James is very involved in supporting organizations that adopt KoboToolbox within their organizations on a private server basis. So we'll set up individual organizations isolated from our public servers and be involved in things like training, capacity building, and working together with teams on their actual data collection projects. More recently, we've also been getting involved in emergency response. And I was just in Jamaica the end of last year for Hurricane Melissa, and recently in Mozambique for the flood response. So we're trying to take a tool that's adopted so widely across the community and try and our best to support the users that are already out there using that tool, not enforcing a solution onto communities or into areas that are in need, but ones that have already adopted this to fill the needs that they have, and how can we serve them better. So we've also seen that digitizing the form doesn't solve the form design problem. As I mentioned earlier, form design is a complicated process. More organizations are collecting more data than ever, but the barriers to form design still exist. And so much rides on whether that data collected is any good. So in this new world of AI, we are starting to explore how AI can be used responsibly in this context. How it can improve qualitative data collection as well. How organizations can capture detailed and open-ended responses in the voices and the languages of those communities, rather than going out with pre-coded, very rigid forms and collecting inappropriate data that doesn't capture the true need. And this principle hasn't changed across any of these transitions. Our principle of trying to increase the quality of data. The technology augments human judgment and it doesn't replace it. And we only integrate AI where it clearly improves that quality and where the risks can sufficiently be mitigated. All right, next slide. If it works. So we've been exploring how to use AI at Kobo in a few different places. I'm going to primarily focus on the form builder as the first entry point into KoboToolbox, into your data collection, And as I've been explaining, this is the start of high quality data, is in the development and design of your form. So the AI form builder, as we are calling it, is a survey development assistant that will be directly implemented and built into KoboToolbox itself. So if you are familiar with KoboToolbox, you'll know that the XLS form syntax that we adopt as standard is quite complicated as well. And what we're trying to establish is lower that barrier to entry for developing complex forms that can be used in the field. So you don't need a background in survey design. You can start with a prompt, something like create a food security assessment for Northern Ethiopia. And the tool generates a structured survey draft as your starting point. But what makes it responsible is not the first prompt, it's what happens after that point. The tool doesn't just output a form, it helps guide you through the process in refining it as well. So it's not just make me a form and it generates the form and you go and collect the data. It becomes a step-by-step process that guides you through how to develop and refine the minutiae of each of your questions and the flow of your questions, the logic between them, to improve the quality of that final output. So it flags sensitive topics as well. You can review it using the AI and it will prompt if there's inappropriate consent or insufficient consent built into your form, checks for logic gaps, redundancies, and questions that might exclude certain populations. It can surface ethical and inclusivity considerations that only an expert might raise in a review, but that most practitioners don't get access to. You can include knowledge, guidance, and question banks or standards that you've already developed within your organization or through bodies like Sphere or the cluster handbooks to ground the AI in humanitarian principles and methodologies that are relevant to your field. You can also work question by question. Sorry, I know this GIF doesn't really explain all the different processes, so never mind the demonstration. I apologize. You can generate a single question, improve on an existing one, construct complex skip logic and calculations through plain language rather than complex XLS form code. So the AI suggests, but the humanitarian decides, and its recommendation is always just a starting point. This matters especially for small organizations, local NGOs, national partners who are doing critical data collection, but who don't have a team or specialists on the technical side to support the development of these projects. If you're a UNHCR, if you're an IOM, they have teams of people, but even their teams are relatively small, often based here at HQ, and aren't able to support every data collection project at their country offices. So the form builder, as we are trying to implement it, doesn't replace the expertise that exists within those organizations, that local knowledge that exists at the field level. We're trying to democratize access to high quality data collection. And so we've designed the same human in the loop approach as with the form builder into further processes down the line. So once you've collected the data, transcription, translation, and analysis as part of the downstream aspects of your data collection. We can touch on that a little bit later if you're interested in that, but for now we'll switch to the next slide. So also for us, and I think for all of us, human in the loop shouldn't just be a technical consideration. It isn't just a feature that we build into the form builder or build into our analysis features. It's the process in which we build the tool itself. And so we want to include the humanitarians, include the practitioners at a local level in various contexts in the design of the tool. We want to come to them with iterations of our ideas and how we've built these products based on feedback and get their insights into it, see how they interact with it, see how it might change the way that they build their forms or collect the type of data that they need for their projects. So in 2015, late last year, just before Hurricane Melissa, I was in Colombia, and we ran a co-design workshop with local humanitarian practitioners around the country to exactly do this and to test our assumptions with them through table-based discussions, through scenarios, various levels of feedback and simulations. But we also didn't want to just go there and make this an extractive process. We didn't want to just go and collect data from a group of professionals so that we can improve our product and sell it to other people. That's not our intention either. So what we tried to do is, as the report by HLA and DFS pointed out, is there is a hunger and a need for AI literacy as well. It's not just here's a human in the loop process that we've tried to build in as a feature. Now go and use it and have fun. There's a process of AI literacy that needs to be built in to support the whole AI transition in any aspect of your tools. And so alongside the workshops that we were doing to try and understand how they interact with our tools and our thought processes and our assumptions, is we tried to create dialogue with them about the risks and the limitations and opportunities of AI in general. How can they use AI, large language models, and different AI tools to improve their general processes? How can they use it to support the development of proposals or analysis or project design? And where are the shortcomings and the limitations that AI might bring into those processes as well? So we try to include, and this is our approach that we're going forward with as well, is to include an aspect of AI literacy and capacity building in general as we try and engage with them as well to get their feedback on how they want to improve these tools for the use in humanitarian context. So we want the practitioners to stay in control, not just remote developers, as our team is all over the world. We want to hear the voices of the communities and have them have a decision in how we steer the direction of our organization and of our tools. And on top of that, we have a second workshop coming up in Ethiopia in a few weeks to continue that process, to take the learnings that we had from Colombia. We've made changes to the iteration of our tool, and we're going to take that back to more communities in a different context, different languages, and to see how they interact with the tool and the type of feedback that they'll bring then. And take that, make changes, and go back to other communities and test the same. So we're doing our best to try and include those local voices. It's obviously a challenging process, and we don't have all the answers. I think that's going to be clear as we discuss this a bit later. And I'm sure any of you who are exploring the use of AI in your organizations, the answers aren't there. But we are testing it, we're exploring it, and we are trying to create dialogue to find that path together. So we don't just want to build tools for the people who use them, we want to build them together. Thank you.
All right, we will now pass it over to Jose from Data Friendly Space to talk about the GNet Situation Hub.
Thanks, Marian. I'm just trying to measure my time, not to bore you. Well, today we're going to talk about one of our products. I don't know if you're familiar with what we do at Data Friendly Space. I'm going to make a brief introduction of some of the work that we've done so far. But when it comes to the human in the loop, I think the Situation Hub is the best and clearest example. Nevertheless, all our products, and we had also like a conversation a couple of days back on this, like every of our products includes the human in the loop. It's we don't understand, and we cannot think about AI, especially in the sector we work in, without that human intervention at every step. We're gonna see later, because some people just see the analysis side of that human in the loop component, but we'll explain it. We're gonna check what Situation Hub is, but before that, we're gonna see a bit of that evolution of different tools that we've worked with and where we think we might be heading. We at Friendly Space were the technical implementer or technical lead of a platform that was called the Data Entry and Exploration Platform. It was the DEEP, and well, I was also the face of the DEEP, and I trained a lot of people on the platform, and also took place, on that development from more the user side. It implied a lot of manual data annotation, data tagging, and back in that time, it was data annotation and tagging what could be automated, and there was already a lot of I don't know. We never advocated directly for that fully automation, and that was the first time I realized, okay, yeah, even if the technology might seem to work, there are a lot of things to think about. It's just we don't need to think just about the accuracy or the speed of our systems, but we need to build trust. We need to work on that, right? After DEEP was decommissioned, we came up with the idea of Gannett Virtual Assistant. We thought, okay, what if we think about a data set that we agree that is trustworthy, and we try to have a chatbot that allows us to interact with it. But we need to add certain limits to it. Again, we're talking a bit about that human in the loop, not only on the analysis we do out of it, but on the way our tools behave. So we came up with the virtual assistant. It's not going to be the center of today's presentation, as I said. Then we thought about situation hub and said, okay, there are certain people that do like to interact with systems, but some people just simply consume analysis, right? And then we thought about situation hub and said, okay, let's convert into prompts the way we see the humanitarian reality. Okay, we monitor a crisis. We have an analysis framework. I think when I mention analysis framework all the time, but we have a way of understanding reality, and let's try to bring that into prompts. And then we came up with Situation Hub, and we were saying all the time, automated analysis. And then we found out that people do not trust automated analysis as such. So we said, okay, let's hold on and curb the enthusiasm on the automation, even though we were actually including the human in the loop. It was just like we thought that the appetite was for fully automation, so we tried to use it. But then we realized, okay, let's think what's going on here. And then we came up with this human in the loop methodology, or at least to bring it to every of our presentations. We're going to see now a bit more of the product itself, and then I'm going to mention something that we're going to discuss later too. That is where we see that this human in the loop component into our products goes through. So what we see is that we need that human intervention. First of all, if we want to get into anticipatory action, and if we want to get into looking into the future, I think, like there is no anticipatory action, there is no forecasting without a human, like break, let's say, or like a stop at least at some point. So we have that. And also we think that not only we need to include humans, but also open who's that human. Until now, it's been us reviewing our outputs, and our tools have been validated and verified by our team of analysts. But I do believe that we not only need to go forward, but also open it. So why not analysts in countries that would take care of this? And we've seen wonderful initiatives like OpenStreetMaps or Wikipedia that are taken care of by users, by volunteers. So we're gonna go a bit more in depth into that later on, but I wanted to give it a bit of context or where we are and what we do at Friendly Space, in case you didn't know. And so if we move now to Situation Hub, basically I'll explain it in the meantime anyway, but it's a portal that provides semi-automated analysis. And what we have is, we consolidate information through APIs, so it's available information that is out there. We try not to duplicate. We bring it to the site. Okay, I'm gonna describe it with words, and I hope you can picture it in your minds. And then we have the situational analysis. As I said, we were able to produce a weekly, quite comprehensive situational analysis with very little time of our analysis. Back in the time, we at Friendly Space, we used to do traditional robust analysis in the most classic sense. And I mean, we all know, but it took really a lot of time. And when we talk about time in the humanitarian sector, we talk about resources and we talk about inefficiencies. So the amount of, it was a full team of full time, 4 or 5 people full time to produce, to be able to monitor a country. Right now, we are able to do that at a fraction of the time with just one analyst. So at the end, and Joshua said before, we're doing much more with much less resources. And in our case, that is the case. But we validate every step, and we're gonna go in detail into that now. But we produce this weekly analysis, and also it contains a media monitor. So we have curated and automated this curation of media sources, so people can access directly the information. In this case, we've enabled instant translation, so people would see in the interface will see the articles in English, but they will be able to access those the original ones that might be in any language. And again, there is a curation, both from our team, but also from users that might, flag if any of the sources might or might not be useful or trustworthy. This is a bit of Situation Hub. Now we're gonna discuss a bit more this human in the loop framework that we've been mentioning. We're trying to consolidate now in a paper, and we're trying to create, actual proper contrasted knowledge out of this. I think AI is here to remain, at least in research and analysis, and I think it's time to define what is the best way to use it and the most responsible one. I think we're all trying to do it. I don't think this is the best or the definitive way of doing it, but this is how we do it. Basically, we intervene as humans on the way we define what we want to do, right? In the way we establish that framework, how we want to frame our reality, and start selecting the sources that we're going to consider as trustworthy. And there's an interesting component here that is consultation. Okay, I would like to say that we co-built. I think we consulted with countries when we've launched the Situation Hub. I would like this consultation to become more like what Josh defined before. That is, co-building of the tools. We execute. There is a technical part of it. So we pre-process. There is like a significant process that maybe users of our tools do not see, because you see a pretty simple interface, but there is like a lot of work in there. Then we have the verification or validation that happens both internally and externally, and the idea is to improve the system. And here we need to continuously be involved and be on top of it, because in 3 months we are absolutely obsolete, and that's it's a reason to be efficient in a way. Why is the human in the loop important? Well, to include local language knowledge, for example, the fact that we explicitly give space, for example, to local sources is something that, in a way, provides that or ensure that local knowledge. Cultural sensitivity. LLMs, large language models, well, the chatbots that we usually see, they are based on information on the internet. The internet is Anglocentric, and sometimes certain changes in certain words might mean a lot, and that is a huge risk. But not only that, sometimes we just need to curate and determine that things might not make it to the public domain, or so the human is some sort of a controller here. We need to decide, and there is an ethical component into this, and it's very important, and we're going to see later. But it's the gaps. Gaps can get into a vicious circle of being absolutely ignored, and there are certain issues that, by not being visible, can be perpetuated in being ignored, and that's something that right now, to be fair, AI systems cannot solve. Now I'm going to focus on the two ways that we have of carrying out this human in the loop. I'm going to explain first the technical side of it, which is, I think, the less known one, and the one that is behind the scenes. And then I'm going to explain a bit more how our team of analysts work on it. But on the technical side of it, before you see our tool, there is this 10 steps. I think there are many more micro steps in between, but we can identify here four phases, let's say. Steps 1 and 2 is we need to understand what good data or what good analysis is, and that's a process that definitely involves the human, as you might imagine. But we need to, to define what is neutrality. We need to define, like how it's gonna rank our data. So it's purely it's quite technical, and then we move into into building that test. That would be like steps three and four, and then you get to start reading like prompt engineering. You start to, it's one of those terms that we hear more and more often. Here we have what we call a RAG, but basically in our systems we take what we consider is the best from commercial large language models. They are fast, they think quite well, and the last, I would say, 3-4 months, like the change has been massive. But then we add this, let's say, filter. We call it like a humanitarian filter. It's a way to change the behavior, like to modify the behavior of our system, so it reacts or it behaves in the way that we would like it to. That happens reactively, but also we anticipate. So by, for example, curating the sources and and the information that goes into our systems, we already somehow modify the way it behaves. So same question, but based on trustworthy data, it provides different answers. Then we validate, and then we create some sort of a technical judge. So not only we benchmark with our team of analysts, but we establish technical judges. So we use the same systems to evaluate how good or how bad our answers are. And then and this happens continuously. It's just not something you do at the beginning. We've changed models several times. We benchmark all the time, and we're absolutely obliged to do it, because if we just remain static for 3 months, we're out of this not race. I don't want to call it that way, but of being efficient and useful, which is the ultimate objective. And then at the end, we deploy and we monitor, and that monitoring goes until today. So this would be the engineering side of that human in the loop that is hidden, unless you're a bit more technical. Yesterday, I got a colleague that was, okay, so just clarifying, I am not technical. I'm not technical. I lead innovation, and I am, I'm the least technical of the technical team, or the most advanced of the non-technical. But yesterday I had 20 minutes on a guy that really understood these 10 steps. Yeah, it was a good test. But again, this is the technical human in the loop, and then we're gonna see very briefly, like our system. It's a CMS, a content management system. I'm not gonna go and demo it, but basically our analysts go into it. They check if the data has been properly extracted, if it actually makes sense, if even the formatting is correct or not. We review absolutely every output that comes out of or makes it into Situation Hub. We make sure that citations are correct. We just don't want to cite for the sake of it. And if we remove the sources that have been cited, we need to adjust the content of it. We validate it, we approve it. Then it makes it to the platform. It remains in the platform, and then once some time has passed, then we make it and publish it into Relief Web. We're gonna see that the user can intervene in different ways, and the idea is to have some sort of a continuous relation with the users, so they become active part of it. I'm gonna explain practical examples of Situation Hub deployments. We've deployed so far the Situation Hub in Myanmar, Lebanon, OPT, yet it's not publicly available, so it has only been circulated with colleagues that are part of the response, and I'm going to highlight that because that's part of the whole human in the loop actually feedback. But on Myanmar, there were a few things to highlight. First of all is that we, from the very beginning, we created Situation Hub randomly a couple of weeks before the earthquake last year. There was like almost an instant endorsement by partner, which was great. And then we engaged into consultations. Myanmar is a rather really difficult country to monitor in terms of information and trustworthy. There is a funny, but actually at the end is what the human in the loop is about, that we're proud of our Situation Hub partners endorsed. And then I got this email, like very urgent, guys, you need to remove this media outlet, like you are using government propaganda into your systems. And it was okay. We have our systems, but actually they failed at some point, thanks to our colleagues and to the human intervention. We removed it, and that's something that happens. So we received continuous feedback from our users that say, hey, this is not accurate enough, or you should check on this. But I think it's a good example. It was in the middle of disaster response, and yeah, it could have been perfectly be ignored. There was also like a process of of checking how accurate the translations were. A lot of local media, and Burmese is not an easy language to be translated. Again, internet is Anglo-centric. Like the amount of data that we have in Burmese might not be enough to get good translations. It worked fine, or at least that what partners said. Okay, for us it was good enough. Like we were able to use the information. It's true that it was an emergency setting or context in which you might not pay that much attention to language. But again, an interesting example. Then for OPT, that is the one that Palestine, the one that I mentioned before, that has not been made publicly available for the public for everyone. And one of the reasons is that it's an extremely sensitive context, and in this case, automation is extremely. It could be harmful in many ways. Language, especially in conflict settings, can lead to massive risks, words and at the end, if we really want information coming like fresh, you mostly comes from media. Media is not always the cleanest, right? But then if you want to get the best, for example, details on, for example, casualties, it happens something similar in Ukraine. You are going to get them from, from information that might not always be the most contrasted, and also it's extremely biased. For example, in Ukraine happens something similar, that the best information coming and bringing casualties is from very, very biased media outlets. So you would find words like traitors or martyrs in the case of OPT. So you need to somehow extract what really is helpful, and also not manipulate information too much. At the end, we're here to use existing information and not manipulate it in a way. So it's not an easy context. Also, on the Palestine case, and thanks to Save the Children, who actually sponsored this Situation Hub, they spent 5 months working on the endorsement of the tool. At the beginning, you come with an semi-automated tool. Partners say that it's super risky, so you need to explain to them, actually, this the human in the loop part. So not easy. Also, they were quite concerned about duplicating efforts, so we managed to ensure this human in the loop while respecting their asks. So yeah, a couple examples. We can go more in depth into them, and now we're going to explain where we're moving towards. Our idea is, as I said, yes, we now understand how this human in the loop processes of today, but that is still being done by our users or by our team. What we want is to crowdsource it. So we've started a pilot, to recruit volunteers that will be trained, and they are professionals from each of the countries we have Situation Hub. We're training them. So the idea is that Situation Hub is taken care of by users. It's a similar concept to, as I said before, Wikipedia or OpenStreetMaps. So at some point, well, I haven't mentioned, but yeah, Situation Hub is free of use. I mean, it's free for all its users, but it has a cost. And the main cost at this point is the human in the loop. For example, for OPT, we spend several hours a week making sure that the outputs are correct. So the idea is to localize and to be able to scale it up. So our idea by 2027 is to scale it up to the most significant humanitarian context, and be able to provide what we consider is a public good, because at the end, and the more neglected a crisis is, the less resources are. So the more relevant Situation Hub becomes. We hope that by next year we can talk about the success of this scale up. And at the end, I acknowledge my position. I work from Spain. My colleague Marion works from Slovenia. I think we've moved. I mean, in the past, we did humanitarian analysis from headquarters or from wherever. I do believe that things have changed enough that we can shift that responsibility and that, to people working from those countries. And I have no interest on remaining doing this type of analysis forever, but rather like being able to enable this democratization in a way of analysis and data. So this is a bit of the presentation so far. Now Marian is going to introduce the next section. So yeah, if you have any comments or questions, please share.
Yeah, so what we'll do now is I'm going to ask some questions to Joshua and to Pepe, Jose, sorry. And we'll kind of see that. And then at any point, please write down your own questions or anything like that, and we'll open it up in just a couple minutes to the audience Q&A. So I wanted to ask you guys, what does meaningful community participation in the humanitarian data ecosystem look like? And maybe, Jose, you can take this one because we just sort of talked about that.
All right, so there is a lot to do, and there is something that we, as for example, we are an organization that Friendly Space, that we're an H2H organization, so we work for other local organizations. So that's the first limitation I would say, is that sometimes I think it's inherent to what we do, but yeah, like in the type of analysis we do, we don't always include communities. Like the closest we get is to local responders. So I think there's room to improve in that, but I think that is like maybe rethinking the role in this case. Let's talk about like local responders, their role as like data consumers and data providers. So right now we do what is considered secondary data analysis. But I do believe there is a lot of potential there on reframing on, okay, so if someone already spent some time and effort on coming to my platform to read and to consume my data, I think it's a really good chance to actually take data also from them. We have actually some ideas on this. We haven't actually consolidated them into a proper project, but I do see. I don't know the details to be fair, and I know there are many implications into that and data protection and so. But I think that the chance that we have whenever people come to us, we should take a bit of we should take that opportunity and use it somehow. And again, we're already doing it, but it's using data consumers or data users as data validators. We already started on this. We want to open it more, but I would like to see how our products get somehow like scored or ranked or prioritized depending on how accurate things are. And I think rethinking the role of data users, I think it's one of those potential areas.
Do you want to go, Josh?
Yeah, sure. I'll add a little bit from Kobo's side. So, I mean, this kind of touches on point 5, but I think part of that community participation is something that we can include with the co-design aspect. So us going out and talking to the communities that use our tools, engaging with them, working with them on their projects, hearing their feedback. Like as Kobo, we have a community forum and we hear a lot of their feedback in general about how the tool is used, where the issues are, the types of projects that they're working on. And we take that feedback and we try and incorporate that into the direction of the platform as we go forward. But we can think about it as well in some new ways as we start introducing large language models and AI into the form builder process, which is also how can we take the knowledge of the communities in how they collect their data, how they structure their organizations and the data community within their local context, and use that to design the prompt that's aiding the form design. If they are based in Colombia in a small community or in a conflict-affected area, the types of suggestions and the types of reviews that the form builder would suggest is going to be different. There's not going to be a blanket review process that responds to every kind of context for a form. And so organizations and communities might be able to help us include that type of knowledge into the design of the form builder so that we can suggest better ways of building the forms, but also better ways of reviewing the types of data that they collect or the types of forms that they're building.
Thank you. So we've heard a lot kind of about the benefits of humans in this new world that we're living in with the age of AI. But what are the risks of human in the loop? We've talked a lot, we need to maintain that human judgment, but, we are biased. We might have some, our own sort of things that we might bring into it. So why should we kind of make sure that we include it? Or, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
All right, I'm going to be here the devil's advocate. I really think like a human in the loop must be the way to go in many aspects. Okay, but to be honest, like I mean, no one would ask, like to have a human in the loop. I mean, like there are certain things that we just assume that they are correct because or we can talk about forecasts. We can do about so human and I think that LLMs are becoming and are maybe much more smarter than I am. So it's just like to question like why the human always first. I do believe that that I'm making this question because we cannot be absolutist and it's a yes or a no and it's not automation. I think like the key question here is okay, let's not think about the data collection, design, analysis as just one process, but fragmented. And then of course, there are certain parts that must be automated, and there is no question to it. Like if we're talking about quantitative data with certain syntax, to determine what vulnerability means, and I think there are certain things that can definitely be automated, and human does not add an added value. But there are certain things on which human criteria is absolutely the way to go. So what I would like here to propose is like to understand how complex this is and how data from data collection to data analysis or even data like a feedback and try to disaggregate it and see how we can prioritize human when it's relevant and also allow like machine learning like our the current capacities to do their best when possible. And again, and something also here is accuracy is not always the most important, or at least not the only important measure here. So we need to consider context. We need to consider the type of decision we're going to make, its implications. So I know that we are moving towards an extremely accurate data system. I don't know, like things are moving super fast. But again, it's like when I mentioned before, like we came with our situation of, hey, it's automated. And all of a sudden we found that, yeah, okay, we don't want, or we might not want that automation unless you do your homework. So I would say it's that like to think what else apart from that accuracy, from computing power, and so not sure if you have any thoughts on that, Josh. Otherwise,
Yeah, I would say a risk that is like not directly human in the loop, but is kind of placing too much of an emphasis as human in the loop as being the solution to the problems that AI introduces. So there are many risks that introducing AI into fragile contexts like the humanitarian sector brings in. We've got hallucinations, we've got biases, we've got all these other complex things that AI introduces. But it's sometimes spoken about that human in the loop is the solution to all of those. And I think what we've seen is that and more research is coming out very recently about this, is humans give in to what we call this automation bias. Is that even though you might put people in the loop in some strategic points to review or to authorize, there's a bias towards just accepting whatever the AI is telling you. And increasingly over time, as you might, I don't know, increasingly get lazy or assume that because the AIs are getting better, I don't need to oversee its decisions as much. And so increasingly we just accept whatever it gives us and we give over to this kind of automation, even though we technically have people in the loop. It's kind of a washing over the problem. And I did see a recent paper that came out. It was more about how decisions are made within the judicial system, but that I think it was 17% of the time humans would reject. No, sorry, 3% of the time humans were rejecting the response of the large language model, but only 3% of the time was the large language model correct. And so almost all the time it was wrong, but almost all the time the humans were just accepting what it was giving because they were assuming that it was giving a better judgment than they were able to give in the first place. And so if we rely too much on the human in the loop as being the solution, and not designing into these cases that, give into this automation bias, it feeds into that process. And then conversely, what I would say is that just by saying humans in the loop solves the problem, again, is not a solution in the sense that you also need AI literacy on top of that. So if people don't understand the risks and the limitations and the opportunities that AI has in some very specific cases, they might over rely on it in certain circumstances and underweigh the certain risks that come in because of the AI. So we've got a question here.
Now, do you have any thoughts on what the training of this human in the loop could look like? How do you train this person?
Yeah, go for it.
You touched I'm not sure if online they heard, but yeah, how would a human in the loop training would look like? Again, I think the same as data is super broad. In this case, I'm going to talk about the analysis part of it. Okay, so how in our case, what we need is to train analysts first on the most traditional sense. So still the criteria to determine whether data is true or not. Now things are much faster, and the LLM provides you with data, but you need to follow a very, very similar process as you used to. So I guess it's training professionals like as we always had, and then people need to understand how these systems work, and you need to understand what is the behavior of these models, and what is the way they have to reason. For example, something interesting on Ganett is that you always get the reasoning that of how conclusions were made. So I do believe that on classic traditional analysis and on understanding the technology, that's in our case. In any case, this is new also for us. We are now starting the training to not outsource, but to let other people out of our organization to do this process. We'll see if it genuinely work or it doesn't. On the primary data, and so I think I cannot reply to that. Not sure, but I do believe that you might be already training.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's something that we are thinking about, and it's what we've tried to include in some of these. Last year in the Colombia design workshop that we did, and for Ethiopia and some of other training that we've done around how to use AI responsibly in humanitarian contexts. And I think it comes into kind of an education level perspective as well. So there's, we have a presentation that we show, okay, you can have all these amazing things that AI does. It can help write your reports, it can help write emails and all these things, but also in circumstances, it can make terrible decisions. It can make up completely false information that actually actively puts people's lives at risk. And it's biased in how it makes decisions if you're relying on it in the decision-making process. And that bias, comes in from many ways, but it's often because of the training data that it might be biased more towards white males, in Western Europe or the US or something like that, and biased against women or minority groups. So highlighting those things, when I presented those and we talk about them, it's often the first time that people were hearing about these risks. And so we would show them how that works. We do a demonstration of creating a project proposal as an example, like a low risk example, and a high risk example of if they are wanting to do an analysis of their data. You shouldn't just be taking a CSV or an Excel file and just uploading it into ChatGPT. Like, what are the risks that come in as soon as you hand over your data to one of these third-party private companies, based in the US with their private or their corporate incentives? You lose control over your data. They're using that data for training, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of risk that comes in there that unfortunately there's a huge lack of literacy around that. And that's part of what was seen in that report. I don't have the solution to how to solve that, around the world, but I think we're working on that from a Kobo perspective. We're going to start working more on that with Data Friendly Space and Humanitarian Leadership Academy, and they're doing great work in trying to educate the humanitarian community.
Okay, being conscious of time, and we also have online questions, and I'm sure you guys have questions. We're just going to kind of skip to the question and answer portion. So if you have any other questions here, looks like we already do. Perfect. Do you want to have a microphone or? I know, I just worry about the online audience. Okay.
And I would love to hear a little bit more what you mentioned.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So this is actually, it's been a feature in Kobo for maybe the last year or so. James, you can correct me if I'm wrong, where you can start collecting more audio-based questions. So if you're doing open-ended qualitative survey, and instead of typing out the responses during the interview, you can just press record and hear their response and have more of a dialogue in that interview. You can also record the whole interview in the background as background audio recording feature for Kobo Collect. This has been around for a long time, but what Kobo has introduced is the ability to then take those audio files and directly within KoboToolbox to transcribe the audio manually or using automated speech to text. At the moment, it's using Google's APIs for that transcription work, but we're exploring other methods as well. We're working with our colleagues here in the room from Clear Global on how to include more minority languages that are outside of the purview of a Google or other corporate companies. So yeah, that's been our focus for now, has been that transcription aspect, and then the ability to take those transcripts and translate them also automatically into any other number of languages. So that's been around for a while. What we have now been introducing is the qualitative analysis aspect, where you can use the large language models for actually coding your transcripts, to ask things like, give me a summary of this response or highlight, certain aspects of it, or you have maybe a selection of codes that you wanted to use, and you ask it to pick out the key themes within the response that align with that. So trying to, in some ways, make the complex qualitative analysis process, that we use in research more accessible to the humanitarian community or those collecting that type of data. And so hopefully as well, that will create or facilitate a shift from just going out and collecting quantitative, pre-coded, very rigid types of data in the field for, say, a needs assessment, and turn that more into a dialogue where you're actually hearing the needs and the voices of those communities. But because the analysis process is so much quicker, to be able to use that data, you can more effectively understand the needs of those communities. So I think that's largely the direction that we've been taking and the hope for the future. Yeah, hope that answers your question.
What we're going to do is, because we also have an online audience, we're going to do one from the audience and then one from online to make sure that it's a fair representation. So we have a question from Sawans and Nada. Many humanitarian organizations collect large amounts of data, but the challenge is often closing that data loop and translating insights into real operational decisions. In your experience, what practical mechanisms help ensure that the data actually influences programming and not just reporting?
That's a problem in the sector. Okay, so I mean, there is no there's no clear like a solution to that, but I think is moving towards that co-design, co-building of the tools in the case. I mean, trying not to be despotic when thinking about technology, and in our case, sometimes we, like we think that like the most advanced technology is always the best. This sector doesn't behave in a very natural way in many cases. So I think it's rethinking that, the same as we said before, that accuracy is not always the main component in our systems. So it's trying to co-build and build for others. As I said before, whenever we use Situation Hub, we try to to consult. We're far from creating it from scratch. There is something that also we need to understand, that is information management is a sector that is not as close, or data analysis is not as close to the field as we'd like it to be. However, many decisions on funding and allocation of resources are done through it. So I think it's a whole conversation. No, I don't have a clear reply to that, and I still think we are far from where we'd like to be. But yeah, I would say again, an actual implementation and a real like a serious implementation of feedback, and feedback not only being reactive but proactive by co-designing. I think it's key. But as I said, we work on secondary data review, and as of today, I still believe we have a lot to do.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's a place that large language models and AI has a role to play. But again, there are a lot of risks that then come in with analysis of primary data when you're starting to give that over to AIs, and especially if we're considering the fact that the main models these days are private companies hosted in the US, having military deals with the US government or with other foreign governments. And so there's a temptation to hand over the analysis part to these models because of our limited resources and the amazingly quick insights it can give us. And we might not be already anonymizing that data or removing any kind of risks that are embedded within a qualitative interview that was done. There might be naming victims or perpetrators or these kinds of things. So I think there's a role to play for large language models and AI in this space, but I don't think the guardrails are necessarily ready yet to handle the type of sensitive data that is often collected in the humanitarian space. But some things that we have been exploring is how can we use more open source open weight models hosted privately on cloud infrastructure outside of the control of a Microsoft or an OpenAI or Anthropic, to do perhaps part of that analysis process as a first step. So to use it to anonymize or at least identify aspects of the data that might introduce risks when it's taken to a further provider. So you can strip all the data of any of those risks before you move it on to an analysis part. So yeah.
I'm gonna, because I thought about a good example and I was pretty pessimistic on the previous reply. But for example, a good example of how AI can help to actually inform decisions, for example, in disaster response, is that right now we don't need to get attached to the classic situation reports that come out of the end of each working day during disaster. So 2 hours into response, like the information flow and the conversation between field and us remotely is extremely agile, and we're able to provide a lot of very specific data points that are needed for very simple things, such as, hey, we need to know whether this road is ready or not, or check on viability, or ATMs for cash targeting. I think that is a massive change as compared. I remember 3-4 years back, we did our situation reports, handed over. If there was a time difference, you would get the next iteration and the next request for your analysis almost 24 hours later. I think that's one of those examples on which AI can actually transform into decisions. Sorry, I just got back, but I don't really had to think of it about it.
One other thing in terms of the practical mechanisms is the data and AI literacy. So with programmatic teams, you have the IM teams and you have the different data teams that sit within organizations, and sometimes those teams don't talk to the actual programmatic teams. And so I think when you build those relationships and also interact the teams and force, or not force, but focus on actually having those discussions around why this data is so important, I think that also helps the programmatic teams actually make those sort of decisions further. I'd like now to open it back up to the audience and see if there's any questions. I see one in the back.
About way that you are monetizing your platforms. If you can tell a little bit more about how you what's your financial model? Because from my experience, it takes a lot of time to build these data platforms. And it's quite challenging to build a sustainable business. Because it's usually mostly the grants or the fee membership or the crowdfunding even. So it's really, really interesting to see how your business model looks.
Thank you. I'm just going to repeat the question because the online audience was not able to hear the last one. So for the online audience, the question was around the financial models that KoboToolbox and Gannett use, and how those practices are translated into sustainability or maybe not sustainability.
Not an easy question either, but yeah, it's a good one because remember I talked about the DEEP before, and the DEEP was like a great initiative. Like it was coordinated, it was grant funded, it was open source. It had everything. If you check all the checks of what like a successful tool would have, and then you say it happened, and it just disappeared. One day to the other. So our lessons learned, at least for Gannett, and I'm talking on behalf of that Friendly Space now, is that we did not want that over dependence on a specific funding source to make our tools die. So we have a hybrid model in which, I said, for example, Situation Hub is a digital public good. It has certain costs of setting it up, and then we've done that through a couple of grants and a couple of sponsorship processes. Then we've maintained them beyond the project limits with our own investment. For example, Gannett Virtual Assistant, or like the initial conception of the tool, was a grant by actually like an accelerating grant, and then with a massive self-investment of our organization. And then we do have, I haven't mentioned today, but Gannett also has like an enterprise solution for NGOs, but it's like an AI siloed space for organizations. That is definitely enterprise. Even though we're an NGO, but it's an enterprise solution. And what we do is that we, with part of the cost or the price that we share for this enterprise product, we reinvest it into the virtual assistant or the Situation Hub. And then for the virtual assistant, we offer it for free. It has a certain limit on prompts. If a humanitarian needs the prompts to be removed, we remove them. But also, if a humanitarian wants to pay, they can pay like a little amount. So at the end, we are diversifying the risks. It's not the best, or it might not be the best. I would like this whole, at least, especially like the curation of the data and selection and having the data ready to be used and clean. I think it should be a public good or a public service. So my ambition for this year or next year is to have it grant funded, because it's the equivalent of having it as a public good. Even though I still believe that the diversifying risk is key for, especially, we're a very small organization, and for initiatives not to be lost. Sorry for the long intervention. You touched really something we've been talking a lot and thinking about since last year. So I could be talking about this for hours.
Yeah, so I'll talk obviously from Kobo's perspective, and maybe Marigan, if you can go back to the slides early on that had the graph of the timeline and our data collected. Yeah. So Kobo, as it started and has remained, KoboToolbox has remained a free open source digital public good, and it will always be that. You'll see in 2019, as I mentioned earlier, Kobo established itself as an independent nonprofit. It grew out of HHI, Harvard Humanitarian Initiative in the US, and had a lot more dependence on grant funding from the UNHCRs, the OCHAs, the rescues previously. And now we are, I think, 1/3 grant funded, 1/3 fee based. So that's through private servers that we host and maintain for large organizations, and 1/3 service contracts, like supporting projects with building dashboards, setting up the data collection projects, and all of that. And those have kind of fluctuated over the years. At the moment, we're about 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But what it's meant in practice when the cuts came last year is that Kobo was almost unaffected. We actually grew last year because we were transitioning over to a more sustainable model with the private servers and with a subscription model for large data projects that were being collected. That the biggest effect that we saw from the cuts was indirectly, as organizations that use Kobo were now having some issues with paying their monthly fee, but it was so low that it didn't even really affect their budget lines at all. So we were able to, upon request, pause payments for them if they asked for it, and it didn't, put our organization at risk or require us to shut down the tool or anything like that. So it's obviously it's grown to become more diverse over 15 years, but we're in a very stable position at the moment, thankfully, and especially now as we're exploring more direct support within emergencies, we're exploring more partnerships within emergency response and tapping into some of those grant funds as well.
Thank you. We have a question online from Sawan Sanada. How can we ensure that the data loop that also includes feedback from affected communities so that data-driven decisions remain grounded in local realities? Yeah, you want to go?
Okay, I think, Joshua definitely should have an answer for that when it comes to primary data. In our case, well, Situation Hub, as I haven't showed or demoed the platform, but it contains like a feature on which the user can interact with us, and then can suggest new sources, new data, correct if something is wrong, and the idea is to use that as a way to include their feedback. This connects with what I mentioned before. I think that we need to rethink the way that our data is consumed, and right now our data is consumed by other humanitarians, and that's a fact. So we acknowledged it, and we don't. I mean, we are a digital NGO. We would never be on the front lines, but we need to think, not only how to incorporate the feedback, but how to be attractive for communities. I think that the agility that AI provides us, that data is ready to be used, might or should make our products more attractive to communities. So I do foresee in the near future, users asking where to find certain services, to access health facilities, or where should I be able to access a distribution of supplies or kits. So we need to think how to be attractive for communities. Once they start using our tools, it's easy to incorporate the feedback. I mean, I don't think any organization proactively or explicitly ignores feedback. It's just like sometimes it just doesn't arrive to us. So on our case, rethinking and trying to provide a product that is attractive to them.
Yeah, I think from Kobo's side, in many ways, we help other organizations collect feedback through, naturally, Kobo being a data collection platform. So we hope to be improving that data flow from the communities to improving projects and delivery of aid and assistance in other contexts. That's not directly provided by us, but we try to provide the platform and the capacity to do so. But we do have, as an organization, as a team, community feedback touch points with our forum. We have a website where people can provide feedback, and we try to, as best we can, take those thousands of requests that come for feature development or changes or bugs that come through, and consolidate that into how we continue to build our tool going forward. So there's that aspect that's always ongoing. But as I mentioned earlier, we are trying to engage in kind of these intensive workshop styles or trainings that we do to hear the voices of those communities and to have these discussions in focus groups to get outside of the bubble of our developer world and the small humanitarian community that lives in an HQ in a small cubicle. So we're trying to expand the reach and the ability for those voices to come and affect the direction of these tools. But again, we have much to learn, and I'm sure we can all do better at that.
Thank you. Do you have another question from the room? Yeah, please.
Question about the user feedback, the users who are using the guidance system. What do you feel the user feedback is? What do the users want to take the systems? Do they want to have bigger control over what the sources are going into the analysis? Do they want to have more human review, or do they want to have it come as fast as possible because the information as possible? So what do you think is the feedback from the users? Where do they want the system to go?
Okay, just going to repeat it for the online audience. So the question was about the user feedback that both the Situation Hub and KoboToolbox get, and what is the main drivers, or where they would like to see those tools and those systems go.
It's not there's not one reply to this, but there is something that so Ganet was thought as an analysis tool, and I do believe that we get a lot of feedback of people that try to use it, for example, and with the current context, a lot of people try to write proposals or to use so I think that we need to come up with something on that, on how to mobilize resources. There is definitely a part of Ganet that can be used for that. That is the assessment of needs and so to get lessons learned. But some of them missing is feedback, and it's also a feeling is we're maybe not being clear enough on the best use of Ganet, or because maybe the use needs to be wider, right? Then again, and you touched an interesting point. The foundation of Ganet is the curated datasets that are behind it. So it can be flexible in many ways, but on the data that is behind, we do not accept external data into it, because it's the whole point of it. For example, if we have now quantitative data into it, we started with happy datasets. So for those who don't know, it's a selection of datasets that are already harmonized, so you can utilize them no matter the context. So the whole point of selecting those is that you can do analysis no matter the country and in the same way, and it's a standard. Some users want their own datasets into it. I'm not sure if that has like an instant solution. We do have that kind of siloed space, a workspace that we mentioned before that could serve to that. But and also part of the feedback is also they want more granular data for example, in Situation Hub. And it's something that technically speaking is feasible. It's just that, again, we remember that we don't charge for Situation Hub and that we always include a human. That's why this whole crowdsourcing initiative. If more people are involved on maintaining Situation Hub, for example, we could provide much more granular analysis. For example, the OPT one has a weekly update of every governorate. It's just a matter of hours spent weekly. So I would say, granularity, misinterpretation of what it could be, and the wanting to modify the data set. That is the core foundation of of Gannett. It might be slower, it might be, like there's something interesting on Gannett that I always like to mention is that Gannett quite often tells you, I do not have information for that because we want it not to use random data or to hallucinate. I think those are the main points on Gannett.
Yeah, and just for the sake of time, I'll keep it very brief. So I think from the last session that we had in Colombia, there were two big points that came out from the group. One directly related to this human in the loop conversation is they wanted to be in control. They didn't want to just say, make me a form and it creates the whole project for them. They want to have more fine-grained control within the process of that design. And so that's also helping us rethink, okay, do we actually want this chat sidebar that gives them kind of more of an agentic conversational control, or do we keep it more question by question? They can help, create me a question that follows on from the one before that talks about this, and then it creates one question or maybe two. So more bite-size support from the agents, and they can review it more piecemeal. So that was the one aspect, is not just like ceding control entirely to the AI or that it's taking over too much of the process. Another one was more on kind of just because it was a prototype that we were using, the agent that we had integrated wasn't able to actually modify particular questions that it had already created. So if they had started creating the form using the chat feature and it had set up maybe 10 questions, and they wanted the AI then to edit some of the questions that it had made, they had to go and do that manually. They couldn't ask the AI to do the editing process as well. So that was something that we're gonna take and improve. You can, like, again, it's a prototype, so we're developing it with them. You could go into each question and edit it manually, but it was removed from kind of the agentic AI flow. So that was an interesting point of feedback from them. So both of those points come into the fact that them as a practitioner, as the expert, want to be ultimately in control of what happens, but have the large language model, the agent, the chat support that process.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I know in the interest of time, we're at past. So just want to thank you all so much for coming here today. Thank you to the online audience. If you have any sort of questions or want to come chat with us, we're here and available. Or you can, email us at either Data Friendly Space, or I'm sure that Josh and Pepe have business cards for you guys as well. So again, thank you very much, and we hope you enjoyed it.